Hello and welcome. I'm Rabbi Emily Hyatt. I am on the clergy team here at Temple Emmanuel, and we're so glad to welcome you this evening to this really important program. We're honored to be a part of it, to be hosting this experience, to have so many diverse and wide-ranging opinions and faces and people with us this evening. A couple of quick things before we begin, as if you are a frequent guest here at Temple Emmanuel, or not guest, you will know these by heart. Just a couple of things. Number one, if you have a cell phone, we invite you to make sure that your cell phone does not participate in our program while you do. So if you can make sure that it is set to silent or some sort of setting in which it will not make noise. If you need to use the restroom, you're gonna go back out those blue checkered doors that you came in from, and you'll turn right, go down the long hallway. And if you need an all access or all gender bathroom, that's gonna be at the end of the long hallway, just turn right. If we need to leave this sanctuary with any urgency, I will draw your attention to these walls in the corner with the wooden slats under the exit signs that don't look like doors, but are doors if you push very hard, and they will lead you to a second set of doors that will take you straight outside. Same with the back. The ones in the back have stairs, so if you need not stairs, go forward. And finally, I want to take a second. There are many of you in the room and more coming in. I know that I heard from a number of people that traffic is a little intense today, but we want to take a second to just welcome all those who are joining us virtually. There's a camera in the back. Throw up a hand and say, hi, everyone, and welcome. We're really grateful for the technology that is allowing, I think, close to 700 people to join us online. Turns out when you give them a choice, they're in their pajamas. So we support you, and we're grateful for you being here with us. And with that, I just want to take a second to say a prayer to set us off. It is occupational hazard as a rabbi that sometimes we begin with just a moment of intention, of taking a second to recognize what a critical conversation this is, and also how hard sometimes these conversations are. And so we pray for just a moment May the door of this synagogue on this day be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love and who are lonely for friendship. May it welcome all who have cares to unburden and thanks to express and hopes to nurture. May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity. May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or straying feet. May it be too high to admit complacency or selfishness or harshness. May this synagogue be tonight for all who enter the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life. May it be a doorway to more conversation, to crossing boundaries and thresholds that are really hard to cross. May it be a doorway to friendships and relationships and conversations that are really hard to forge, but are going to be, I think, the only possible part of what makes us community, what makes us friends, what makes us neighbors, and what makes us able to sit with each other no matter our differences and build a city and a state and a country and a world that we feel proud of. Amen.
Rabbi Hyatt, thank you so much, and that doesn't support me when I lean on it. My name is Paul Edwards, and I'm glad to welcome you here. I'll say a few words about myself in a moment, but as we begin tonight, I really want to thank Temple Emmanuel for opening up their doors tonight, and what a beautiful invocation for this evening. Such a lovely space, and we so appreciate the professionalism of the staff here and the extraordinary technical resources that make it possible for us to stream this to so many. The book of Isaiah, chapter 58, provides powerful teaching about our individual and collective responsibility to humbly set aside quarrels and disputes and seek ways to help those that are dispossessed, who are hungry, who are homeless. And as that stirring chapter closes, Isaiah prophesies, and this is from a translation that I use, "And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in." I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening for repairing the breach and doing so in a time of toxic political polarization. Our hope is that this will not only be a set of really interesting conversations, but that you'll be able to go home with some actionable ways for all of us to act individually and collectively to set aside contempt and help repair the breaches in our society. As I said, my name is Paul Edwards. I direct something called the Wheatley Institute at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And our little institute seeks to provide research-based approaches to shore up core social institutions of family, religion, and the rule of law. And we've been really honored to be part of an interesting coalition of organizations that sought to step outside our ordinary modes of political and social discourse and instead take refuge in sacred spaces such as this and find new ways of engaging constructively across differences. This project began earlier this year with a powerful evening in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., headlined by the governor of my state, Republican Spencer Cox, and Maryland Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat. We also convened a similar event in August in the sacred confines of the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Museum with Governor Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma. The organizations involved include the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., Wesley Theological Seminary, the National Institute for Civil Discourse at the University of Arizona, One America Movement, and the Dignity Index. For today's event, we're so grateful to Temple Emmanuel and the Office of the Governor of Colorado for their support. I also just want to note generous financial support for this project from the Hewlett Foundation, the Packard Foundation, and the Walmart Foundation. So let me tell you how we're going to proceed. We'll hear remarks about the challenge and opportunity before us from Dr. Tim Shriver, Chairman of Special Olympics and co-founder of Unite and the Dignity Index. Then I'll moderate a panel with a discussion with Governor Jared Polis and former Colorado Governor Bill Owens. Then Governor Polis will lead a discussion with some local faith leaders, including our host, Rabbi Hyatt, Dave Runyon, Executive Director of City Unite, and Shara Smith, CEO of the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado. And then Tim will come back and give us a rousing call to action. So let me introduce you to my friend Tim Shriver. As chairman of the Special Olympics, he's driven the largest expansion of that organization, growing the movement from 1 million-ish athletes to what, now 6, 7 million around the world, including athletes from 193 countries. Tim loves story and narrative and has harnessed the power of Hollywood to tell some extraordinarily inspirational stories on film. One of my all-time favorites, he helped to executive produce Peanut Butter Falcon, if you remember that fabulous film. And tonight, he's here in his capacity as co-founder and chair of Unite, an initiative to promote national unity across difference, and the incubator of a really important project that you'll hear more about called the Dignity Index. Shriver studied at Yale University, earned a master's degree from Catholic University, and a doctorate of education from the University of Connecticut. Please join me in welcoming Tim Shriver.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Rabbi Hyatt, thank you. I don't know where you went. Oh, there you are. I want to say from the time I was started teaching, I always sort of began to have this latent dream that I would someday become a Baptist minister. But I have to say I never aspired to the rank of rabbi because it was just too high. But here I am on the bema for the first time in my life, and I'm very proud and very grateful for your beautiful prayer of welcome and for the tradition that that your tradition captures of strength in the face of adversity, of power in the face of oppression, and maybe in all things of faith in the face of all the complexities of life. We stand here on the shoulders of the giants, going all the way back to the prophet Isaiah, that we've already called into the room, but also on the giants of the tradition, of the Jewish tradition in this country, who have so enlivened and leavened our country with a kind of commitment to justice that has transcended your tradition and been a gift to all of us. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank Governor Owens, former Governor Owens, and Governor Polis for inviting me. I don't know if you knew you invited me, but you did, and I'm very grateful for that. And Paul has been an extraordinary champion of this work, and we've been very lucky to work together from the National Cathedral to Oklahoma City to here, and with the NGA, with Governor Polis, when he was vice chair and now as chair. We've seen governors. Many of us have seen governors as the central lever for the shifting of our political culture, and I still happen to believe that that's the case, and so I'm very grateful to have you here, Governor Polis, and to have you have been such a champion of this, obviously during Governor Cox's leadership at the NGA and now under your own. I'll be brief. Let me just make a few quick comments. I think it's important for us to take stock of why we're here. The problem we are here to discuss is not differences of opinion. We do not have a national problem of differences of opinion. We instead have a national problem of the way we treat people who differ from us in the way they think. We have a national problem, we like to think of it as a problem of contempt. We do not have an issue of whether or not we can find common ground on issues. In fact, differences of opinion are essential in a democracy. They are not to be shunned, pushed aside, glossed over, warmed up, centered, made nice. We're not inviting Americans to tamp down their commitments to the passions and principles they believe in. Far from it. Those are the actual fire that makes democracy light the world. We are in, however, a new situation in which we're challenged not by those differences, but by the way in which we treat each other with dehumanizing contempt. In our view, and it's certainly in my view, the crisis of contempt is evident everywhere, but it often slips below the radar. It seems to be a derivative problem. We don't have a problem of contempt, we have a problem of immigration. Or we don't have a problem of contempt, we have a problem of the way we're politicizing education. No, actually, we have a problem of contempt. It's a new, I venture to say, not being a politician and in the presence of leading politicians, it's a new issue in our politics. And if we don't treat it like an issue, if we don't start to think of it as needing constituencies and needing advocacy groups and needing influencers and needing watchdogs and needing conversations like the one we're having today, we won't take it as seriously as it needs to be taken. Contempt hides. Most of us in this room do not think we're contemptuous. I'm not going to accuse anyone. But my hope is that during the course of this evening, we will come closer to seeing how we are all, in a sense, part of the contempt problem. Some of us more than others, me. I'm not accusing, I'm owning. But we have to begin to recognize that we have to unveil, if you will, the shield that has been surrounding us, that our self-righteousness and our principles and our demands, that as one woman said to me, I don't know what you want me to say, I hate hateful people. It's a dangerous statement. Hate in opposition to hatred, as we all know, is a very dangerous formula for destruction. And many of us in this room, if we're politically active, have come to think that hatred in pursuit of our principles is valiant, is noble, is admirable. In fact, people will say, I have my colleagues on the Republican side will say, well, if I don't act with virulent hatred, my fellow Republicans will accuse me of being a rhino. Have you ever heard that? Yeah, I've heard that. I'd like to say it's not a rhino if you're not contemptuous. It's only like, I don't want to be, but I'm not going to be a Rico, a Republican in contempt only. And Democrats will say, hey, if you don't oppose people on the other side, you're a sympathizer. I say you don't have to be a sympathizer, but I'm not going to be a demonizer. There's a difference. We have a myth, I believe, amongst us in the country. I hear it a lot since the election. There's nothing we can do about it. This is just the way things are. That's politics. Tim, you grew up in a political family. You know politics is a blood sport. It's always been this way. It always will be this way. Politics will always be poisoning our country. I don't accept that at all. The myth of the way things are is one of the great opponents to changing it. The myth of the way things are is what led in 1968 to 200,000 Americans being institutionalized in this country, not for anything they'd ever done, only because they had a diagnosis, intellectual disability. Put them away for life. That was the way things were, and it took a rebellious spirit and a strong commitment of individuals to break down those walls and bring those people out and bring them into the light of day. For 300 years, there was a myth of the way things are in this country. Separate but equal. Servitude is required. That's the way things are. And it took people valiantly giving their lives to change that. Hundreds of years in this country, the myth was the way things are is, well, people of the same sex can't love each other. They can't be out in the open. The myth of the way things are has to be destroyed, and we can destroy this. This culture was made by us, all of us. It can be changed by us. It is ours to change. So I would like to suggest that the myth of the way things are right now is 100 million Americans have ended a relationship in their family or amongst their friends over politics. That's about 1 in 3 of us. So if we were looking at this room representatively, about this many of us would have ended a relationship in their family or amongst their closest friends because one of us liked Polis and the other one liked the other guy. It's in my family. My family, yeah. That's the way things have to be. I don't buy it. The culture of contempt, in my view, is the primary contributor to the mental health crisis in our children. What do our children say? I have no hope in the future. Why do they say that? If you listen closely, you will hear their voices saying, I don't see any way forward for our country. I don't see anything I can believe in. Where are they hearing that from? Us. When we demonize and treat others with contempt, our children are hearing there's no path forward. Almost half of our children are saying they're either in clinical depression or close to it. That's on us. We don't have to accept that. We don't have to accept this pattern. Almost a third of Americans will say they want their state to secede from the Union. Maybe, Governor, you're hearing that now. Now that this country's going in this direction, maybe Colorado should just break off. 30% of Americans in polls will say, I think my state should secede from the Union. That's not acceptable. So our view is that we've got to enliven our national debate with the opportunity to shift the dialogue. You'll see in your seats, if I can find my little card, this little thing called the Dignity Index. It's the simplest of all possible tools. You can learn it before I finish, and I'm going to finish in about 90 seconds. It's a scale. So we could rate Tim Shriver on how well he did when he talked about his colleague Tammy Pfeiffer. We come from different political perspectives, Tammy and me. We talk almost every day. Most of the time, it's 5 and up on this scale. Once in a while, she dips down and treats me with contempt. Not me. But this scale scores you. So if you say to yourself, fill in the blank right now, when I talk about the other party, if it's the Republicans or MAGA Republicans, fill in the blank. When I talk about them, how do I score myself? Look, I suggest you start in the 3, 4, 5 range to see where you fit. And if you're talking about Democrats, Biden or Harris or Polis or others, where do you fit? How do you speak about others when you disagree with them? If you look at this little scale from 4 down, it's decreasing levels of dignity or increasing levels of contempt. A 1 is the language of the Holocaust. They don't deserve to live. We go up from there to 2s and 3s. They're ruining things. They're evil. We're good. They're bad. Classify yourself. You don't have to admit it. But when we ask folks, where do you think most politically active Americans fall on the scale? 2 minutes. I'm almost done. Where do you think they fall on the scale? Most people will say, well, Democrats generally are about a 3. And Republicans, no, both Democrats and Republicans are about a 3. But here's the thing. A lot of people will raise their hand if we had more time, and we will have some later, and say I'm a 2. They're going to ruin our country. And a 2 is just north of violence, just north. So when you talk using 2 language, remember, many people will hear this as a call to violence. The dehumanization contributes not just to the breakdown of families and the failure of problem solving, but to the probability and the increase in probability for violence. We're here today because we see and we know we have alternatives. We can not just call people out, but call them in. We can not just talk about the other party, but talk to the other party. We can not just fight for our principles, but add 1 principle. Add 1 principle. As you fight for your principles, treat others with dignity. It's almost obvious and yet sadly counterintuitive. But we're lucky to be in a state with a governor and with many other people here who want to build a coalition, maybe even a subculture. In a culture of contempt, it's hard to beat it, but you can create subcultures. Margaret Mead taught us this years ago. Small groups of committed people who organize a constituency for change, who give politicians some cover when they act with decency and dignity towards the other side, and who inspire other political leaders to enter the fray and challenge the status quo. I'm enormously grateful to be a part of this challenge system and look forward to the conversation ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. It's my honor to introduce to you your governors. It's great to be back in Colorado. I actually graduated from Littleton High School back in 1981, and so really great to be back in the Mile High City. As you know, Bill Owens was known for his pragmatic approach to governance. He had a truly distinguished career in public service. Prior to becoming governor, he served in the state house and the state senate as your state treasurer. He served as 40th governor of Colorado from 1999 to 2007. And he focused on a variety of issues: economic growth, transportation infrastructure, education reform. In the 2002 Colorado gubernatorial election, Bill Owens won re-election with 62.6% of your vote. Does anyone get 62% of a vote anymore? That may be, I understand that may be one of the largest victories in gubernatorial history here in the state. In fact, he left with such high ratings, I think if you didn't have term limits, perhaps, might still be there. Anyway, Owens transitioned into the private sector and continues to engage on a number of important public policy issues. Jared Polis is the 43rd governor of Colorado and serving since January 8th of 2019. Prior to entering into politics, Governor Polis was a tremendously successful entrepreneur, having founded or co-founded a number of really interesting, innovative companies. Prior to his governorship, he represented the 2nd Congressional District here in Colorado from 2009 to 2019. Polis has delivered historic savings for Coloradans and their families and is focused on expanding access to housing that Coloradans can afford in communities they want to live, boosting reliable, convenient transit options that save people time and money and help to improve the air, and ensuring that Colorado students have access to high-quality education and can thrive in a strengthening workforce and economy. Let's welcome to the stage Governors Bill Owens and Jared Polis. Let's see if these work. I think they do. Well, Tim has laid out the problem so eloquently. We live in a curious time because I think there's so much that Americans actually agree on, and actually the research shows this. There's a tremendous amount of research that shows that there's a large perception gap, that we perceive the other party as having more radical and divisive views than the actual members of the party have, than actual Americans have. Americans seem to agree on the importance of many of the things we just talked about, both of you dealing with: infrastructure and energy and education and transit and those kinds of things. So as we get underway here, we want to try to find a better way of talking across difference. And maybe we'll just begin with you, Governor Polis. There's been this program over the last little while called Disagree Better. Can you tell us a bit about how that came to be about?
Sure, and this was really, the work will continue, of course, but about a year and a half into the work through the National Governors Association, and Tim mentioned the role of governors. Tim actually presented to our governors as well on this, working with Spencer Cox of Utah, your governor, and I was his vice chair all last year. We reached out and we've got over 40 governors to participate in this initiative. So, and effectively, it's a role that to a certain extent comes naturally to the executive. So I mean, when you look at mayors and governors, if someone were to do some grad student in the audience is looking for something, you can apply the dignity index to kind of the words of members of Congress versus mayors and governors. And I think that mayors and governors would probably be up in the 4 or 5, and Congress would probably be 3, even 2. Obviously, exceptions, of course. There's some states people in Congress, and there's some governors that we don't, are a little bit overly divisive. But by and large, because of the work we have to do, I think it was a logical place to turn. And so what we did through the National Governors Association is we elevated this issue. First of all, I don't think Spencer or I had any idea the great NGO nonprofit work that was being done in this sector. We just knew it was needed. We knew the governors had a voice. And then we found all this amazing work that was being done by Tim's group, by 10, 15 other groups, some focusing on colleges, some focusing on particular issues and how to bring people together. And we provided a forum of kind of this needed message, and more than just the message, really the tactics of how to get there. How do you do this? Sadly, disagreeing better has become something of a forgotten art, especially in political circles, and trying to help educate not just governors but a broader audience about how, in fact, we can make this a reality in our country.
Thank you. So, Governor Owens, this state is very diverse, as you know. You have what's typical of a lot of Western states. You have kind of a bright blue capital city, as it were, and sort of shades of purple going out and into a more red rural area and so on, where there's different interests and so on. I'd like to know, with the wide diversity of views, how did you find it possible to serve that diversity as chief executive of the state, as it were, and work with people that didn't even vote for you, although there weren't so many that didn't vote for you?
Paul, you're awfully kind to talk about the second election, but my first one I won by 6,000 votes. And so thank you for...
So across 2 elections, I won by more than you, because I won by 10 points and 20 points.
Exactly, so. Exactly.
He won his re-election by 2 points more than I won mine.
But to the governor's point earlier, I think that when you're an executive, whether it's a mayor or a governor, or you really are, by definition, needing to represent everybody. And if you're in Congress, as the governor was for 10 years, or I think you might have a slightly different constituency, but I really did believe that I was governor of all Colorado, as the governor does, even if not everybody voted for me. And it's one of the great unique characteristics of most of American history. And we can walk through the presidents, we can, and realize that the campaigns, at least until recently, might have been divisive, but afterwards, we would say, well, he's my president. And I used to tell my friends overseas, and I spent a lot of time overseas, I'd say, you know what, don't really focus on the campaign, because afterwards, everybody typically comes together. And my concern, Paul, and the same as Tim, is that we're not coming together like we used to. we're staying divided when, in fact, Governor Polis is my governor. I won't disclose whether or not I voted for Governor Polis, but he's my governor, and that's the way I regard him.
And so, I don't know, have the two of you ever engaged in a substantive conversation on an issue that you disagree on, that you can remember?
Well, yeah, dating back to when he was governor, I was on the State Board of Education. So, and I was, generally supportive of a lot of the work he did in education. And there were some parts that I wasn't. But again, it was always it was a policy discussion. It wasn't like Bill Owens is trying to destroy our schools. It was, I think, that this particular part of the way it's evaluated, isn't working and could be done better. And then, of course, we also were able to figure out a way to provide property tax relief more recently. He was involved with that. I was involved with that. Of course, the legislature was frankly the hard part, but we cracked that nut. It was a tough one, but we did.
So say more about it. I'd actually like to get in the nitty-gritty of one of these issues. So what was that particular issue?
Oh, it's a complicated one.
Is this the Tabor issue?
No, it's related, but
Okay.
it's fiscal, and it's really... So the thing with property tax, and many of you pay it, either directly or indirectly. If you're a homeowner, you pay it. If you rent, you're basically paying it as part of your rent. But the state doesn't see that money. It goes to your county, your fire district, thousands of these districts in our state that basically get 100% of their money from property taxes. The state gets it from sales and income tax. We have to give a quick version of this because it's long. But at the end of the day, what happened was home values went up 40%, 30%, 50%. That's great. That's a wonderful thing if you're a homeowner. But it didn't mean your income went up that much or you could afford to pay that much more in property taxes.
And the governor's right. The issue was property taxes went up by a whole lot. Our friends in the legislature weren't willing to reduce them probably as much as the governor wanted to. Two initiatives were placed on the ballot. Those initiatives would have substantially reduced property taxes from the new high. The governor and I, through intermediaries and even directly together, worked out a compromise. He called a special session, and the two initiatives were taken off the ballot. So it was a good example of good people who trusted each other and actually agreed in the moderate middle, resolving an issue that Colorado probably won't notice again and won't remember in a few months.
And I think out of the 100 legislators, I have to look it up, I think something like 97 or 98 of them voted for it. I mean, it was amazing. It was strong majorities of Republicans and Democrats.
What a great story. And done without rancor.
Actually, the governor called me. He said, okay, are you okay with this? I said, you bet. Are you okay with this? We made an agreement on some of the technicalities. I trusted him, he trusted me, and it happened. And this is actually the way democracy should work, even though it's an initiative, even though there were good people on both sides of the issue. I'm not placing myself at the governor's level. I used to be, but we worked it out, and Colorado's going to benefit from it.
So both of you served in legislatures before. How has that experience informed your work as governors in looking at trying to serve the entire population?
It's a valuable kind of experience, I think, for a governor. And I came from business, but I'm definitely a better governor because I was in my case, the national legislature. Legislatures are tough. National is 435 people. It's enormous. Here it's 65 in the House, 35 in the Senate. A lot of it comes down to personalities and people as much as it does to issues. That's one thing you learn. Not even party, really beneath party, personalities and people, and of course compromise. And I think that's what the Founding Fathers set up legislatures to do. That's what they're supposed to do, right? They're not supposed to endlessly investigate and attack and undermine one another, and whoever's in charge kind of have the sole goal of undermining the other side. They're supposed to work things out in a way that has broad support among the people and actually solves the problems.
So you mentioned something about personalities. Do you see a different kind of personality being drawn to political engagement these days than maybe when you've both started?
You know, I do, because we've made it so hard to be a public servant. I don't like the term politician. I understand it's applied correctly sometimes, but I will always tell, no, I was a public servant. But we've made it really hard because this is kind of a binary system, to the points Tim was making earlier and the governor has. And what we really need to do is realize that truly we agree on about 80% of the issues. We really do. I love history, Paul, and if you look back at thousands of years of history, what people used to believe, well, Jared and I, the governor and I, he's left of center, I'm right of center. We agree on 80% of the issues. Should we be able to kill people? No. Should we, and these are things that societies in the past, and so it's important to emphasize the areas we agree when we also then disagree. And we really do agree on most substantive issues. I believe in Social Security. Do I believe that it should be 7% increase next year or 3.5%? That's where the governor and I could disagree, but that's a pretty damn reasonable thing to be able to disagree about.
Do you feel that social media has changed the equation of being a public servant?
Well, the way that we consume media absolutely has. So, I mean, what you have is you do have people going into politics to sort of further their celebrity status in a small ecosystem rather than to solve problems. I mean, the purpose that I do this and that Bill does it, and I think the vast majority of public servants do it, is I want to make life better. But there are those, again, and it's a temptation of maybe the career that comes next, and you want to be a commentator or you want to be whatever it is, using politics to kind of build up your own following of people rather than trying to participate in politics to make life better for other people.
Bill, do you have thoughts on this?
You bet. Social media is driving us apart, and the challenge. I have 5 granddaughters under the age of 9, and my kids understand that those young ladies are going to be late adapters to social media, because it really does fire synapses in your brain that are not always healthy. I mean, when you see kids sitting there at a dinner table with their parents and they're looking at their phones, I'm thinking, you know, my dad used to make us turn off the TV in the next room at dinner time so that we would have to be a family. So yes, I don't have the answer, but I know that if I, and my kids are grown, but if I were having kids now, I would give them one of the stupid phones, you know, that you can just communicate with, just, you know, those old flip top, and make them have that till they're 15 or 16. That way you can call them, but they can't be on TikTok, which I think is about to go away anyway.
Now, that actually leads into, and this is really good advice. Both of you have had just such substantial experience, not only in public service, but in private business and other places. Any one piece of advice for how to engage with people who hold strongly held positions different than your own?
Well, you know, and Tim alluded to this. First of all, it's okay. We're supposed to have different opinions. What a horrific place it would be if we all thought exactly the same way. The whole point of a vibrant, healthy democracy is to air your differences and have discussions, and there would be no discussions if everybody agreed. And so it's really about elevating that into something that's admirable, to really say that's wonderful. Ask questions about why or how somebody else feels the way they do. Try to understand it better. Try to understand what their goal is. Perhaps the goal of that opinion or of that proposed policy is similar to your goal. You might just have a different way of wanting to get there. So be curious and celebrate the differences between one another.
Love it.
I'll just end my part of this with 1973. I was graduating from undergraduate school. I had been accepted at the University of Texas Law School. It was going to cost me 3 more years of tuition, and I already owed 4 for the undergrad. And a friend said, well, why don't you apply to the LBJ School of Public Affairs? I did. They needed, this is literally true, they needed a Republican. It was a brand new school. LBJ had, and there were 50 students. This was the 2nd or 3rd year of the LBJ. They needed a Republican. I was an active Republican, was working in the Bush campaign then for state. So I go to the LBJ school, and I'm literally, out of the 50 students, there were 2 of us Republicans. And what I had to learn, Paul, was if I wanted to have any friends in grad school, I was going to have to learn to get along with what I always say, my friends in the Democratic Party. And I'd walk in and they say, what do you think about Nixon today? Or what the hell's happening with Agnew? I just learned, I had to learn to realize that Democrats and people who didn't agree with me could be and actually are my friends. And that was probably why I won governor that first year when it was so narrow.
You know, it just breaks my heart that 1/3 of people have severed off a family member or close friend just because of their politics. You know, we were having a dinner table discussion at our family. This was last year, so our daughter was 9, our son was 12, and we were discussing Republicans or Democrats. And our daughter, Cora, she was 9, she said, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm in the happy birthday party. So I have, there you go.
Is this
The happy birthday
the happy birthday party? Are we?
I'm not putting it on.
It's for the happy birthday party.
Okay, Governor Polis, can I tell you something? I worked in political communications. We had a rule in Governor Herbert's office. No silly hats.
Right.
Is that true, Tammy? Yeah.
I still remember Dukakis in the tank.
Well, everybody loves a birthday party.
Yes, they
Happy
did.
birthday. Listen, this has been such a delightful conversation. Will you please join me in thanking our governors?
Good job, Dad.
We're going to make our way, Bill and I are going to go back to the audience here in just a moment, but let me just introduce the people that the governor is going to be engaging with here. Wonderful local faith leaders that we have. Of course, your own Rabbi Emily Hyatt, Denver native, serving here as the associate rabbi at Temple Emmanuel, joined the team here in 2018. Rabbi Hyatt's academic background includes a Bachelor of Arts in Constitutional Law from American University, an MBA from Indiana University, a master's in Jewish education from Hebrew College, and she was ordained at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Los Angeles. I understand that earlier this year, it was announced that Rabbi Hyatt, alongside Cantor Elizabeth Sachs, will assume the role of co-senior rabbi here at Temple Emmanuel upon the retirement of Rabbi Joseph Black in July of 2025. Through her leadership and dedication, she continues to make just huge contributions to the Jewish community here in Denver. We'll also have coming up here shortly Dave Runyon, who helps faith, business, and government leaders unite around common causes in the Denver metro area through his role as executive director of City Unite and as a consultant for businesses that have a desire to make a more positive impact in their community. So Dave helped start something, I'm trying to get my head around this, a neighboring movement. We'll be interested to hear a bit about that. That's now spread to well over 2,500 churches around the country. He's co-author of a book called, and I'm going to go out and get this, The Art of Neighboring. I have a neighbor I need to practice this with. He speaks locally and nationally, encouraging leaders to collaborate for the good of their cities. Before founding City Unite, Dave served as pastor for 10 years at Foothill Community Church and the Next Level Church. And then we'll also have Shara Smith here with us. Shara is the Chief Executive Officer of the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado. She brings well over a decade of nonprofit management experience to this organization. Her prior work includes interfaith initiatives in Delaware, managing money and politics programs in California, overseeing national affiliates for cancer research, and consulting with social justice-oriented nonprofits to enhance their effectiveness. Under her leadership, the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado has addressed issues such as Christian nationalism and reproductive rights, and she continues to lead the faith-based community here in Colorado on important social justice initiatives across the state. So as Bill and I step down, will you please welcome Shara, Dave, and Rabbi Hyatt.
They're taking their birthday hats with them. That's great. Welcome, everybody. And thank you for joining us. You know, we want to seek from you, guidance and learning from both how your faith informs how you disagree better, both in the religious realm, of course, the political realm, the family realm. Faiths haven't always done it well. We have wars of reformation. We have the Crusades. We have times where it's come to conflicts based on faith. But there are also great examples to be learned from faiths about how people of different faiths have and very different worldviews have coexisted and been very supportive of one another. So let's start with each of you. How does your own faith and value system help shape how you constructively interact with others, and in particularly people who hold different views from you, that may be a different religious view or political view or anything else?
Thank you so much, Governor. So my values are very much shaped by my family. So I run an interfaith organization, but I also come from an interfaith family. And so when we gather for the holidays, we usually share a prayer before we sit down to eat dinner. That's not uncommon. Most families do that. Many families do that. However, my family, we go around the table, we share a prayer from Christianity. And then we share a prayer from Judaism. Then we share a prayer from Islam. Then we share a prayer from Buddhism. And then for those
That's a long dinner.
That's a long, yeah.
Bring on the food.
And when
Like,
the
where's the
food, when you smell the food, like at a certain point, you kind of want to wrap it up. But nonetheless, we make the time to do that. And for those who choose to, they might share a poem or some words of encouragement. Why do we do this? Because that is the representation of the faith at my family table. And so, why does that matter? I don't view that as a very interesting coincidence about my family. When I see that kind of intense diversity, I see purpose. And so I'm very much in the right field based on my family background. But one of the really interesting things about it, and what has really shaped my values, is that I don't have the luxury of choosing those people over there to write off. Because when I do that, that typically means that someone at my family table is impacted by that decision. So that has shaped my values tremendously, and I'm in a lot of spaces that otherwise people might think I don't have anything in common with the folks in that space, but I guarantee you, based on my family, I have something in common with them, and it keeps me in the fight in moments when things are really difficult and really tough, because if I give up, someone at my family table will be harmed, can be harmed. So I have to stay in it, and that's just based on my own family background.
I actually would answer sort of similarly, not about my family, but about the upbringing that I had in the Jewish community. One of my favorite parts about this conversation is that this is something that we work on all the time within Judaism. There's a lot of different kinds of Jews and a lot of different flavors of Jewish practice, and we sometimes do a great job of sitting together with different Jewish identities and figuring out how to be together and hear each other and listen to each other. And sometimes we, like a family, are less adept at those moments. I grew up not in a Reform home and not in a Reform synagogue. I grew up in a conservative synagogue, which is just slightly more to the center, in a practical and observance capacity. And then I had a period of my life where I was much more traditionally observant, and then I discovered Reform Judaism. And so I've lived in all of these different denominations myself and taken pieces of them with me. And so it's a really interesting experience to be holding what is, I think, a very diverse self-identity Jewishly, and then watching how we all relate to each other internally. And that is really hard. It's really hard to look at somebody who does something different than you and not think that their choice is a judgment on you. It's not, but oh, does it feel like it? And so to be able to sit with people who are practicing or observing or choosing differently than you within your own faith, I think is a huge learning curve, to be able to do that and to feel confident that I know who I am and what I believe and what I stand for, but I also very much know who you are and have been where you are and know what you believe and what you stand for. And I can live in both without feeling less. It's really hard, and it's a lot of work, and I think that that's where some of this, for me, and my interest in this conversation and my gratitude for this conversation comes from.
So one of the central tenets to my faith and to, I would guess, most of the people in this room, if you're coming from a faith perspective, is this idea of loving your neighbor. And I'm still looking for the place where it says love your neighbor if they believe the same way you do about these social issues or some of those different things. And so I think what drives me is this idea of staying connected to and having a loving posture with whoever's in front of me.
So, as part of your ministries, you do a lot of work with your congregants, with people in the world. And what experiences do you have in sort of seeing the fruits of people finding ways to disagree better? People, you've worked with in your congregations, in your families, between different faiths. Is there any stories you have that can help sort of inspire and inform us where you've seen examples of disagreeing better work and that perhaps we can learn from?
Sure.
So,
Oh, well, the first one that came to mind was actually an interaction that I had with you. Early on in your first term, you and I met, and we were very clear that we didn't agree on everything. And you kind of like set the tone of that. I remember you telling me, hey, listen, there's a lot of things we're not going to have in common. I'm an openly gay man. I'm progressive on some social issues. I come from a Jewish tradition. You kind of like stereotype me as a evangelical faith leader, which was fair. And we were just able to say, yeah, these are things that we don't agree on. And you followed that up by saying, but you said, I want to get to know the faith community more in Denver and in Colorado. And we both, after kind of saying, like, here's some things that we have differences on, we both identified this common ground of saying, we both feel like we have a mandate to care for people in need. And despite these other things that we have convictions on, we have commonality on this, and we can go after this together. And so for me, that was like this beautiful picture of being able to not compromise convictions, but to find common ground and to work together. And I think that's like where I've experienced unity break out most has been around unity with a purpose or around a cause. Unity for the sake of unity a lot of times seems to kind of fade and be weak, but I appreciated that about our first interaction and a lot of the interactions that we've had since then.
I very vividly remember the first time that somebody called to yell at me about something that I said in a sermon. And Rabbi
It
Black...
happens to, by the way, religious leaders in every faith.
Right,
So.
yes, 100%. And Rabbi Black said to me, he said, you're going to call her and you're going to listen to her and it's going to be hard. And I was like, okay. So the sermon that I had given, it was about a really simple and light, we talked about God. And she did not like what I had to say about God. And so I called this lovely woman and said, tell me a little bit about it. And Rabbi Black was absolutely right. It was really hard because my job was just to listen. That was it. My job was not to try and convince her that I had said anything particularly intelligent or right, or that anything that I had said was not what she thought it was. My job was just to call her and to listen. Because my job was actually not to talk about God. It was to talk about what happens when a faith leader stands up and says something that makes you feel alienated because you believe differently or because you hold differently or because you understand the world differently. And so I listened, and I listened to her talk about my sermon, and I was like such a baby rabbi, so it was really intense and complicated. And I think that being heard was what she needed, and that was the lesson and the advice that I got, and that was what I gave to her. And what she wanted to know was whether or not there was space for her perspective in this particular sanctuary, and the answer was of course. And so I listened to her, and then we talked a little bit about what she believed about God, and that was the end of the conversation. And it was a really important lesson for me about what's my job when somebody disagrees with me. And the first job that I have is to listen.
I think that's an excellent point around listening. So the Interfaith Alliance has been, for the better part of a year now, on a journey to create conversations that are necessary conversations, but that are very, very difficult to have. And so last night, we were very honored to have both Rabbi Hyatt and Rabbi Black at our Force for Good event. And that was significant because the keynote address at our Force for Good event last night was a joint conversation on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. I will emphasize that it was a joint conversation led by our local rabbi and our local imam. No one is doing that nationally. We know, we checked. Everyone does either a conversation on anti-Semitism or a conversation on Islamophobia. We decided to hold it together because, number one, when you hold it together, it doesn't allow people to retreat to their most comfortable corners and then block out what the other side has to say. We wanted to force people to really take a moment to hear and listen to each other and to hear the perspective that they otherwise would not hear unless they were in this position where it was being shared with something that was more familiar to them. And so we're rolling out these additional trainings in 2025, but last night was really our first opportunity to do it. And I was so grateful to both Rabbi Black and Imam Khalila for being our speakers. But I also shared with the audience the process, what it took to get us to that point of having that joint conversation. And the process was one that was not clean, it was messy, and it involved a conflict that happened between our Muslim and Jewish partners and me as we were working on the curriculum for this training. And it was such an interesting moment of conflict because, like I said, our Muslim and Jewish partners, they weren't disagreeing with each other. They were upset with me about something I said, about a word that I used, that they said, you know, we just don't like you using that word. And so you'll never guess what the word was. Any guesses? Rabbi Black, you can't guess because you were there. So, any guesses? The word was peace. They disagreed with me using the word peace. Now, I was shocked by that. I could not understand how anyone could dislike this word that, for me, had a particular meaning. So I asked them in this moment of conflict, I said, look, I don't get it. I don't understand why you don't like this word. I need more information. Can you help me understand why you don't like me using this word? And so one of our partners said, you know, that word gets thrown around a lot, and my community is still suffering. I said, that's a fair statement. So then we said, okay, we have to define peace as more than just the absence of war. And they said, okay, that we agree with. Our other partner said, we don't like you using that word peace because I just don't think it's possible. I just don't think it's possible. And so that threw me, but I also recognized that in the moment, I had to find a way to help him believe in something he's never seen before. Because he said, this has been going on for so long, I don't think it's possible. And that was crushing, because if we don't even believe it's possible, then the actions we take will be consistent with those beliefs. So how do I bring him along a path of faith that allows him to believe in something he's never seen before? And so then that was the conversation that we had. But I loved the moment because they were disagreeing with me, and the important action that I took in that moment, referencing what Rabbi Hyatt mentioned, is to ask for more information, to listen to why they were so upset about the use of that word, and then that helped me bridge the gap in understanding so that we could reach that point of agreement and continue with our work.
So another thing that's happened over the last, half century is if you asked half century ago, tell me about yourself, somebody would say, I'm a father, I'm Jewish, I'm Catholic, or whatever, I'm Italian American, I'm Puerto Rican. They have all these things that would come well ahead of I'm Republican or Democrat. Now, up at the top there is which political tribe you're in. And you all must have, even in your own congregations, people of different political tribes. And so what techniques do you use to address that gap you see in your own congregation about people seeing people within your congregation as the other, even though they are the same faith, just because of political differences? How do you face that?
So Interfaith Alliance has over 400 faith families in our statewide network, representing over 24 faith traditions. So we have a lot of diversity within our network and a lot of different beliefs at our table. What keeps us together is that we allow people to show up where they can. We allow them to self-identify where they have alignment with us and to show up on those particular issues. Do we always agree? Absolutely not. And there are instances where some of our faith families will say, you know what, we don't agree with interfaith on this. And we say, we understand. And they say, you know what, we're actually going to fight you at the legislature on this. And we say, we understand, and we'll see you there, and thank you. And so sometimes that's where things land. And then later on, that same group might say, hey, we really like what you're doing on this particular issue. We want to help. We want to support. You're welcome to come and sit back at our table. And so it's a very unusual way of doing things, but it works for us, and it keeps a lot of people at our table who otherwise might not be there if we had to agree on every single thing.
So just a quick anecdote from the Talmud. There's this crazy story about these two rabbis that fight with each other about everything. Their names are Hillel and Shammai, and they never agree on anything. And at some point, they're having some kind of disagreement, and one of them says that you should do something one way, and the other one says that you should do something the other way. And there's this really interesting part of the Talmud that says that a heavenly voice comes and says, these and these are both the word of the living God. Both of them are right. And God shows up to say it, which is really unexpected and not something that happens a whole lot in the Talmud. But that's how the story goes, that these and these are both the words of the ever-living God. And then God goes on and says, but we're going to rule like that guy, not like the other guy. And this guy always wins. They say, we're going to rule like the first guy, So there is an answer, even though both of them are God's word. And the difference between the two, and the reason why the first guy won, is because he always spoke about the second guy with love and with kindness and with respect and with dignity. And he would always reference both opinions whenever he was going to teach about his own opinion. That was why he got to win that argument. And so as we think about, like, what does that mean in a space like this? And we're a 150-year-old congregation with a lot of people with a lot of beautiful, wonderful, often very openly shared opinions, which is such a gift, and we're so grateful. And so you think about, like, how does everybody sit here together and hold all of that? And the answer is, it's really all about how we look at somebody else and listen to them. And are we lifting up someone who is different from us or who believes different from us, or are we pushing them down? And the answer is that everybody can have words of God. And the thing that will make the difference is if we are allowing space for the people who are different than us.
Thanks. I don't lead a specific faith community right now, but I have a lot of friends that do. And this question is very pertinent. And I think what I've observed is the faith leaders that have navigated this well, the faith communities that have navigated this well, have not tried to hold on to everybody. Our posture matters, and those people on the far, far extremes, it's probably not a good use of your time to chase them and to invest your time there. If they want to come for a fight and that doesn't fit into the DNA of your faith community, you probably just could save yourself a lot of time by letting them go. So the question is, that still means that you're going to have Republicans and Democrats that are showing up. I think one of the best things we can do is hold up a mirror to the depravity and kind of the toxic polarization that exists, and to be able to say, like, this isn't the way forward. And what you said is, like, when the end game and our motives are around relationship and staying connected to people, even when we have major differences with them, we're creating a place where bridge building is going on. And like this is like the antidote to polarization is staying connected to people who have different convictions than we do. That is the way forward for our culture, for our faith communities. And so the more that we can create spaces like that, where we can hold up that value and to encourage people to be bridge builders and to help be to be a bridge builder. And I think I read this somewhere, this isn't my own, like, bridges connect people to places they otherwise couldn't get, and bridges hold tension. And I think that in our faith communities, we need to be encouraging people to hold tension and not run from it. If we're experiencing tension, it doesn't mean we're doing something wrong. It might mean that we're in the exact kind of work that we should be in. And I think that's the faith leaders and the faith communities I see that are doing this well are holding that up as a better way forward and not trying to go and make sure that you don't lose every single person in your congregation.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for sharing some insights from the faith community to how we can disagree better as a society. Thank you for participating in this panel. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Tim Shriver.
I don't know if you can tell, but I broke my glasses. So I got this really cool look where so I'm going to suggest, I'm going to start with a quick anecdote from a speech I once heard given by the late Reverend Archbishop of South Africa, Desmond Tutu. He was one of the great fighters against apartheid in the battle for freedom in South Africa, Anglican Archbishop. And he was giving a talk, must be 15 years ago, I was privileged to be in the audience, and he'd given this beautiful talk, and the question came up from the back of the room, having seen all you've seen, Archbishop, don't you have to admit that evil is more powerful than good? And he took a pause, he had a very light countenance and a beautiful sense of humor, and you wouldn't know from meeting him or seeing him that he had gone through any adversity. He just carried his soul, I guess I'd say, with such generosity of spirit. He said, no, he says, I do not admit evil is not more powerful than good. And then he paused and he said, but it is better organized. So what do we have, 50, 75 people here, maybe 500 or 600 online. I'm going to make a pitch. I'm going to try to build your congregation, Rabbi. We need to organize around these principles. It's good to have a conversation. It's good to remind ourselves of the ways in which we can transcend or bridge these gaps, but it's not enough to look at isolated examples of good work and say, that's wonderful, the governor's great, the former governor's great, this minister, this rabbi. That's not enough, because the energetic frequency surrounding what we call the political, media, outrage, industrial complex is organized. People are getting paid huge amounts of money. One guy, he says, you're up against a $2 trillion business, good luck. When you add the algorithm and partisan media and the entire political structure, and I politics all over my family, I'm not pointing the finger, but what's rewarded in politics, I'm sorry to say too frequently, is outrage and contempt. So if we're going to beat it, we can't just applaud Governor Owens, that was so great. We can't just say, Rabbi, that was so wonderful, good listener. We have to organize. We have to form coalitions of people who demand these qualities from leaders, who insist, yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to summarize what I heard here a little bit. And I like to think of this maybe in categories. I heard a lot about skills. Governor Owens started by saying, we were two good people who treated each other well. That's a skill. That's not just a circumstance. That's a skill. We heard a lot about skills. Rabbi Hyatt said, my first job, she didn't like it, but she said my first job was to listen. Right? Initially, it's like, that's difficult. How many people here in the room, some of you are here with partners, how many people would look at your partner and say, oh, he's such a good listener? Oh, see, I could tell you guys are romantic. Yeah. He's a good husband, huh? Oh, that's so nice. There's one. But good listening is a skill. We can teach it. We can practice it. We can reward it. Listen to the other skills I heard. Governor Polis says, I want to get to know faith leaders. That's curiosity. You know, as one of my teacher friends says, teach children how to be curious, not furious. He could have responded to you being an evangelical and said, you know, you guys are against everything I believe in. I'm going to figure out how to screw you. I'm sorry to say that could have been his position. But he's instead approached you with curiosity, right? So curiosity is a skill. We heard so much. Staying connected. How do you do this? You stay connected. That's a skill. We can reward people who do it. We can give money, even if it's $5. If you see a political figure, mayor, first selectman, state representative, congressional leader, senator, governor, and you see them do it right, write a note. I saw you do this. Here's $25. And when you get a fundraising appeal, anybody get fundraising appeals from political? Okay, here's the thing. We haven't done a full inventory of this, but my guess is about 80% of fundraising appeals are contempt-laden. Write back. I like the candidate. I like you, Governor this or Senator this. I like what you're doing, but I will not give to you because your email is full of hatred and contempt. Send me another email and I may consider giving. But if we don't remind people, if we don't tell them this, you've been with the political consultant, says, Governor, it's late in the race. You know, not in your second election, but in the first election, you probably had somebody say, you got to go negative. We got to go after this guy. So we're rewarding people when they go negative. We have to stop rewarding them. So these are skills we have to organize around. What else did I hear? I heard solutions. The governors both talked about education, taxes, but there are a lot of solutions that we can agree and work on. We can work on inclusion in schools. We can work on AI. The younger generation needs us to cooperate on AI, on bridges and highways, on infrastructure. Bills were passed. Let's applaud them. There's a lot of things we can do that actually build coalitions. We can come together and figure out how to celebrate our 250th anniversary. It's just a few years away as a country. We don't need Republicans to celebrate it differently than Democrats. That would be a disaster. So there are a lot of solutions, I suggest, and I heard some good stories. We need a new narrative. If we trust the narrative we're hearing to be the narrative that defines us, we will come to believe that the narrative that defines us actually creates the reality that is us. We won't remember tonight as defining our state or our community. We'll go home and we'll turn on the TV and say, see, the country's going to hell. Because the story the television is going to tell you if you go home and watch Fox or MSNBC, I'm sorry to say tonight, is the country's going to hell. Save unless we destroy the other side. You're not going to remember that this is the story. Two governors squabbling over their combined pluralities and who had slightly more or who had slightly less. That's politics the way I remember it as a kid. But you won't remember that that's actually who we are. So tell these stories on social media. Find the stories of dignity. Find the stories of the heroes of the people who are turning pain into purpose. Find the stories of people who are finding in tough challenges pathways through them. Tell those stories. Click on them. Don't click on the next headline that says Trump is a demon or the next headline that says the Democratic opposition is the demon. When you click on it, you're paying people to send more of it. We all are. So we need a whole new set of strategies on how to marshal the skills, find new solutions, build a narrative structure that allows us to see in ourselves, see in the story, a version of us that we can believe in the future. I think we have a big task ahead of us. Are we done? Is my time up? Yeah, she's not even showing me signs anymore. But maybe I'll just close with, I see the governor's had to leave, but I'm happy to be in the happy birthday party. If he'd given me a hat, I don't have the prohibition. But I also want to say, I'm not a minister, I'm not a rabbi, but I am a student of faith traditions. And I've always puzzled, that people want to put the 10 Commandments up everywhere, but they don't want to put the Shema up everywhere. They don't want to, Christians do the same thing, or Jews do the same thing. They want to put up the things that remind us of wrong, but they don't want to remind us that the fundamental, at least from my point of view, the fundamental prayer of Judaism is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. That means everybody's God in this room is the same God. Whatever the texts, the canons, the histories, the practices, the rituals, the morals, they point in the same direction. Hear, O Israel, Shema, O Israel, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. It is one. The Lord is our. It's all the common faith that undergirds the many, many traditions is what we've tried to capture in this little, I know it seems silly to say it because I feel like I'm overplaying my hand, but we built this little index simply to remind people that to treat people with dignity is our collective highest calling. Why? Because in the end, I know people make fun of us. Oh, you're trying to unite the country. My cousin says to me, what do you do all day? Just go around uniting people? Well, not really, but kind of. I just feel like we have to remind ourselves of our common origin story and our common hope story. Instead of asking people what you think about the issues of the day, maybe ask people what they hunger for, what their deepest hope is, where their pain comes from. We can find the ways to navigate whether to spend 7% on property tax or on the cost of living increase or 3.5%. I mean, it's really not that hard, as you said, Governor, right? And we can find ways. Like in my family, we used to be able to say, we need a Republican for this. We don't anymore. We got a doozy already, okay? I have a whole other story about that, but I'm not going to tell it. Thank you all for coming very much.
Tim, thanks so much. Oh,
We have a little game.
we have a game.
It's very fast. Okay, can you see the screen? This was written yesterday. No. Is anybody young enough to be able to see the screen? Does anybody have strong glasses? Okay, so this is a little invitation. Why don't we start at the top? Now, see if you can read from your Dignity Index cards how this fits. And I'm going to need help too because I can't see the screen. Who said they could see it? Okay, can you start reading? First date. Oh, here we go. Will you start us? Yeah.
On the first day of dignity, my true love said to me, "Dear, I really hate and want to get rid of you."
That's a 1 on the Dignity Index, in case you didn't pick this up. Rabbi, will you go? Well, I'm going to save the religious leaders for the higher scores. Politicians, Governor Owens, will you do number 10? Public servants, sorry.
On the second day of dignity, my true love said to me, "You ruin everything and are such a bad person."
Paul?
On the third day of dignity, my true love said to me, "I'm good, you're bad, so we cannot be."
Isn't that mean? Tammy?
On the fourth day of dignity, my true love lied to me. Let's not discuss it, darling, just be lucky.
Who wants to do 5? Go ahead. Go ahead,
On
sir.
the fifth day of dignity, my true love said to me, "I'm all ears, my dear, even if we disagree."
Rabbi?
On the 6th day of dignity, my true love said to me, "We both love to laugh. Could we discuss over tea?"
Shara, you want to go?
On the seventh day of dignity, my true love said to me, "I want to hear more, my sweet. Could the problem be me?"
Dan, you get to do.
On the 8th day of dignity, my true love said to me, "We are one, you and I, no matter what, and we will be."
So that's sort of a little Christian, but not really. Anyway, thank you all for.
We hope you've had just a really enlightening evening, that you have some things to take home. Loved the list of skills that we can all be working on. And just as we finish up here, I think it will say something up here about an opportunity to give us some feedback on the event. If you're online, there should be a way to click through and answer a survey. And there should be a URL showing up here. Oh, there it is. With a QR code, we'd love for you to give us some feedback. Again, so grateful to Rabbi Emily Hyatt and the whole team here at Temple Emmanuel. This is such a wonderful space, and I hope you felt that just by being here, having these conversations in a place that's just imbued with reverence, that we've been able to have better conversations together. So anyway, my great wish for you is that, for you and for me, is that we can go forward from this evening being repairers of the breach and restorers of the paths in which we dwell. God bless you. Have a good evening. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.